Hi, and welcome to Coffee with Craig, where I talk about all things that are happening in the news from a spiritual standpoint. And today I want to talk about the Oppenheimer movie and some of the mysteries that surround ancient nuclear bombs. Well, I don't know if you've seen it yet, but if you haven't, go and see the new Oppenheimer movie because Christopher Nolan's new film is an absolute must, I think. It's a gripping biopic about Robert J. Oppenheimer, who, as you will know, was one of the primary people behind the creation of the atomic bomb. So the film features one of his most famous quotes: "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." Now, he said that. That's a quote from the Bhagavad-Gita, the old Indian text. And he said that and told us he said that in a 1965 NBC news documentary called Decisions to Drop the Bomb.
We knew the world would not be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad-Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that one way or another.
And this came to mind, he said, from the Hindu scriptures when he saw the nuclear bomb go off. This has upset a lot of Hindus because the quote is said from the holy book just after a sex scene, or very soon after it, when Jean Hancock is in bed with him, and they're talking about she was the one that was in the Communist Party for a while, and when he was in the Communist Party for a while, and of course they're upset by that because this is a holy quote now added into a situation that they didn't feel appropriate. But anyway, that aside, and what do you think? Are you Hindu? Do you think that was wrong? Well, that aside, it's probably unlikely he said it at that time from the way things have been written. He said the quotation probably at some point just soon after the bomb had gone off. But and it's not actually known when he said the quotation, and it's probably not as has been portrayed in the film whatsoever. But the Bhagavad-Gita, I just want to sort of just go into this quote a little bit because it's a really fascinating quote, and it opens up a whole new sort of area of spiritual thinking, I said. So it said, "Now I become death, the destroyer of worlds." Now that was said by Krishna. Now the Bhagavad-Gita is an old ancient book. It's over 2,000 years old. It's a brilliant read. I love it. I've read Yogananda's version in particular. I'm reading that at the moment. It takes ages. Beautiful book. The commentaries that you can get on it are fabulous too. So he said it from the Bhagavad-Gita. Now this has got 700 odd verses in it, and it's a philosophical guide for people because it was set at the time of the Great War in India, a huge great war that happened in India, that historic war that is supposed to have killed millions. And the problem was Krishna appeared on the battlefield and was the chariot driver of a guy called Arjuna. Now, Arjuna was one of the princes on one of the sides, and he had a dilemma, because on both sides of the battlefield, he saw his brothers, his cousins. These people were going to war to the death, to fight to the end on a massive war that would have consumed the whole of ancient culture if it happened as it said in the Mahabharata. And he looked on both sides and said, I can't kill these people. These are my brothers. These are my sisters. These are the people that I love on both sides of the battlefield. What must I do? And Krishna was the incarnation of Vishnu, who is one of the three main deities in the Hindu thinking. Vishnu, the sustainer. And Vishnu, appearing as in the avatar form of Krishna, said, look, you've got to go along with this, mate. This is just the unfolding of existence. This is as it happens. We have to just allow the world to unfold. It is kind of part of this this thinking in India that that everything is the unfolding of Brahman. Right, that's not to be confused with Brahma, the creator god. Brahman, the absolute oneness of existence. Brahma is unfolding, and our duty is to just run with it. It's called nishkama. Okay, nishkama karma. All right, nishkama karma is the idea that you just give up the fruits of your action and run with it, as it were. Let life unfold. If whatever's going to be will be, whatever's not going to be won't be. And according to this thinking, there's very little role of human will. Human will is what they call the jiva, the personality, the small self. But that small self, that jiva, has got to become at one with this Brahman, which actually becomes the small self becomes the big self, called the Atman. So this is the kind of the spiritual teachings. And when Krishna said to Arjuna, now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds, that was said at a point when he became multi-armed, like represented himself as the Brahman, as being everywhere all at once. A bit like my book that I wrote, God is Everywhere. The idea that everything is God, even your enemy is God, even your brothers and sisters that turn against you are God, And in life, we have to accept that sometimes wars happen and we just run with it and we allow it to unfold in a spiritual way. So that's a little bit of my thoughts about the understanding of the context of that amazing quote that has stood at the time, since the time of Krishna, but also was said, I think, by Oppenheimer in a way to think, what have I unleashed upon the world? And when he was asked about it, he said something quite curious, because he called it the first nuclear explosion in the modern world. He said, this is the first nuclear explosion in the modern world. And that referenced the idea that there may have been nuclear explosions before in ancient times, because it's the first one of the modern world. What about before? Were there other ones then? Because that quotation from him seems to suggest that he understood that there were nuclear explosions before. Now, Oppenheimer spoke loads of languages, including Sanskrit, and he was a very brilliant man on so many levels. But he may have been referencing what we call the Astras. Now, the Astras are in Hindu mythology. They would have been in the Mahabharata, and they are also in the Ramayana. These are the ideas of these superweapons that occurred in ancient times. In Ramayana, for example, we read of flying saucer type things, like flying cities and all sorts of incredible things, including this idea of there having been massive weapons in ancient times. So are we going through another phase just like happened once before? In the Great War of ancient India, millions took part and there were only a handful that survived it. It was like everything was destroyed. This was the beginning of what we call the Kali Yuga, the beginning of the Dark Age, when Krishna appeared as the avatar of this age that we live in now. It was symbolic of our age to come, perhaps. Or was it an actual reference to an ancient civilization that actually destroyed themselves through these ancient weapons? There's, for example, there's the Brahmastra. This is one of the most powerful of the astras. This is described as a weapon that's capable of huge destruction. It can only be excuse me. It can only be used once in a lifetime by a warrior. It was so destructive it could only be used once, and this has been described as being a bit like a nuclear bomb. So, did they have nuclear weapons in the past, or, as some have suggested, were these things like bombs of consciousness? Because there was links to ideas of mantras and things with these things. Did they have superpowers that were using perhaps things that we haven't even begun to understand yet, perhaps harnessing a destructive aspect of consciousness itself, you know? And there's some other ones as well. There's some that were associated also with Shiva, the Bhagavad-Gita, I think it's pronounced. I'm not sure. I've got it written down here, actually. And this was another extremely potent bomb, you know. And the Agni ones, there's ones associated with the god of fire, Agni. And this could produce huge fiery effects that could cause great devastation. And then there's the Varuna Astra too, which is the god of water, and would bring the control of huge powers of water that could destroy things by like tsunamis and things like this. And also the god Vayu is the god of the wind. This is another one that could be harnessed. It's like they harness the 5 elements in different ways into a destructive power and can generate enormous power. And then there's other descriptions of weapons that could release a hail of arrows, you know, like our cluster bombs, perhaps in Ukraine, you know. So there's all sorts of fascinating things there in the past. And maybe, you know, Oppenheimer was a man of great deep spiritual insight. Maybe he had some deeper feeling about this is the first of the modern nuclear weapons. And the first, maybe not the first time we've had these hail of destruction. So much of the movie and much of his life was about man's conscience about these things. You know, what are we doing? And I think it's a wonderful thing that this movie is out at the moment, because at this time, here we see nuclear weapons being rolled into Belarus. What on earth is happening there, with all sorts of banter about whether these should be used or not in self-defense, as they say. And we're seeing nuclear weapons being propagated all over the world. We're seeing them propagated in China. India has them too now. Pakistan has them. Iran probably has them ready to launch now. You know, we are entering another period of fearful possibilities of nuclear conflict. And I think this film is brilliant that it's come out now. It makes us rethink some of the things that may have happened at that time in the Second World War, whether it was right to use it or not. I mean, I wouldn't be here if Oppenheimer hadn't invented the nuclear bomb, because my father was training to be a pilot, to be one of the bomber pilots, to go in on the beaches should they invade Japan. He was preparing and being taught how to attack beaches for Japan. The first fighter pilots that would gone in and done those sort of dive bombing exercises would have been wiped out. They were always wiped out. First line troops of the Air Force were always wiped out first. So he would have definitely died in that. So in some respects, you know, I have to thank the world that nuclear bomb was invented by Oppenheimer. But it also makes us rethink, doesn't it, about the use of these terrible bombs of destruction. And did we perhaps destroy ourselves once before? You know, the ancient stories that we read in the Ramayana and the Mahabharata go back, I think, much further than what traditional historians think. They go right back to that pre-Ice Age time, I believe. So, and there perhaps was something that happened way, way back, and these stories are an echo of. Anyway, thanks for joining me. That's my thoughts for today. And I'd be interested in your thoughts. You know, where are we going now? Where is the world going with this nuclear world? Should we get rid of nuclear bombs, or are we stuck with them? And have we learned the lesson once before, and do we have to relearn it again? Okay, well, thanks for joining me. And don't forget, if you're new to the channel, do please subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now. Well, if you enjoy my shows here and you enjoy reading my books and you enjoy my work generally, you might like to join me on Zoom, because perhaps you'd like to open your own psychic powers and discover and awaken your spiritual potential. So you can join me now on my transformative psychic workshops, which are on Zoom. Group sessions on Zoom. You will learn to meditate. You'll learn to develop your psychic skills. You'll learn to open your spiritual powers. And I'll share with you my knowledge of spiritualism, plus my knowledge from the East, from India, and the things I've learned over my years. And together, perhaps, we can navigate this troubled world together. We can share our feelings, our thoughts, our hopes, our ambitions with clarity and purpose. So you can join me. Click the link below. It's in the description of this video. Spaces are limited, of course, but join me to unlock your psychic and spiritual potential.